Hello and welcome back. The Quran reads, the Jews say Ezra or Uzayr is the son of God, which is puzzling because the Jewish people have never said that. But we're in the 21st century and research has improved in leaps and bounds in recent decades, so we're going to address and solve this mystery today. We've covered the topic in previous videos, but we've got more details about it, so buckle up. Let's address the logical problem, the meaning of the verse, and what new information reveals about it. The logical problem is quite obvious. The Jews have never said those words, therefore it must have been added to demonize the Jewish people. Islam criticizes Christians for saying that God had a son, so they could have fabricated a similar argument for the Jews. Either that, or it was simply an error, but in any case, that would prove Islam false straight away. However, we are going to see that it is not a mistake at all. The answer to the problem is found in the video on screen from Mel at Islamic Origins. Link is in the description. In the video, he shows an old manuscript where the word written was not Ezra or Uzayr, but Aziz. I'll use Aziz going forward in this video. This information is essential to understanding what happened and why the verse could not be understood until now. So, we now know what word was originally written, and we know the word it became. Let's discuss the meaning of the verse. The beginning of Surah 9 verse 30 reads, the Jews say Ezra is the son of God, and the Christians say the Messiah is the son of God. Now, the second statement is correct. Therefore, we see that both sentences talk about the Son of God in the literal Christian sense, hence why the parallel statements. Therefore, seeing as the first statement is calling someone the Son of God, that must be a reference to Jesus, because that's the only character in the Abrahamic faith called the literal Son of God by any faction. Let's dig deeper. The word Messiah is interesting. If Aziz were a name, then the Quran would read, the Jews say Aziz is the Son of God, and the Christians say Jesus is the Son of God. But that's not what it says. In fact, if the second statement read, the Christians say the Messiah, the Son of Mary, is the Son of God, we'd realize that Aziz would be a separate character and not Jesus. However, the Messiah appears on its own as a title. Therefore, Aziz must also be a title. When we read the rest of the verse, we see that the writer explained that those statements were said by the Jews and Christians as though out of ignorance. At this point, you'll be forgiven for thinking that it is a very standard Islamic view, and you'd revert to thinking that the verse was just fabricated to demonize the Jewish people. However, the next verse gives the game away entirely. It reads, they have taken the rabbis and monks as lords, apart from Allah and the Messiah, and they were not commanded except to worship one God. Look at the translations. They add words that change the meaning entirely. Look at Yusuf Ali, for example. And they take as their Lord Christ, the Son of Mary. But none of that is there. The verse is very clear in the Arabic. People were meant to take God and the Messiah as lords. Period. The Arabic says, Allah wal Masih. Then, in verse 34, we get more clues. The author demonizes monks and rabbis for devouring wealth, which is reminiscent to a story associated with Salman al-Farisi, but that's for another time. When read in conjunction, we see that the author wanted listeners to follow God and the Messiah, as opposed to follow their spiritual leaders blindly. We can bring in briefly Surah 96. That's where the famous Iqra comes from. The author tells his audience to read in the name of their Lord, who created man, etc. We've discussed who that is in other videos, and we'll delve in greater depth in future ones. But for now, let's stick to the Aziz topic. The author wants both Jews and Christians to take God and the Messiah as lords. So the Christian theme in the verse is clear, before Imams tried to hide the meaning, of course. So, Aziz is yet another title for Jesus. Let's explore why this word was changed through diacritical marks and find the reason behind it. And if you are enjoying this content, please give us a like and a sub because it helps us reach more people. Thank you for your support. So, why did they change the diacritics and transform Aziz into Uzayr? Hmm? Well, Aziz means beloved or beloved one in Aramaic. Saint Murad translates the word as dear, and Islamic translators render it as mighty or even almighty. The thing is, Aziz is one of the titles for God in the Quran. It appears in different manners, usually as Al-Aziz, but also without a definite article when it is used as a predicative adjective. For example, the Quran says Allah is the mighty or Allah is mighty. This title appears a lot in the Quran. The Islamic interpretation is that Aziz is a title for Allah. However, Surah 9 verse 30 shows that it was not so to begin with. In fact, it was just another title for the Messiah. Can you imagine if Muslims read their book and realized that all those verses that talk about Al-Aziz did not mean Allah, but they mean the Messiah? The Messiah they were meant to take as Lord together with Allah, as shown in Surah 9 verse 31? That's a Christian view. Allah is used as a generic term for God, meaning both the Trinity and Godhead depending on the context. Countless verses in the Quran talk about Aziz and also Lord, the Creator, and other titles we'll discuss in future videos. Muslims are told that they mean Allah, but when we look closer, we realize those titles were for the Messiah. All the references to not having a companion or descendants are in fact about Jesus too, clearly. Yet they've done an amazing job at hiding the true meaning of the verses. Well, until now at least. Let's discuss briefly a bit more about the context in which the Quran was written. Firstly, anyone familiar with the works of Gunther Lulling, Christoph Luxemburg, or Gabriel Sauma will know that the Quran was originally written in Aramaic. The Arabic definite article alif lam is exclusive to Arabic and therefore absent from the original writings in Aramaic. That means that at some point during the second or third translations of the book, someone had to remove the Aramaic definite articles and add the Arabic ones. They did so haphazardly, hence Messiah got the definite article, but Aziz did not. Just like other titles like Mahmad or Ahmad got no definite articles either, making them sound like names. Secondly, why would any faction of Jews say that someone was the Son of God? It seems very contradictory to Jewish beliefs. A probable answer is found in the works of Odon Lafontaine. I'll oversimplify the topic. Odon suggests a group of Judeo-Nazarenes were responsible for the first versions of the Quran. These were Jewish people who came to accept the Messiah and tried to convert other Jews. Unfortunately, they followed heretical accounts of Jesus for the most part, unless they were more orthodox than we give them credit for, and much of their original writings were censored during the creation of Islam, of course. A link to his book, The Great Secret of Islam, is in the description, and I recommend anyone interested in understanding how Islam was created to give it a read. Conclusion: the Jews say Aziz is the Son of God exposes Islam completely, because they never said that, and Allah would certainly know it. Or at least, that was the view until now. When we understand the context in which the Quran was written, we understand why that statement is in there, and why they hid the meaning through diacritical marks later. If a group of people called Aziz the Son of God, the followers of the new religion would realize that Al-Aziz was not Allah, but the Son of God, immediately exposing the lies. And well, that's all for today. Is there anything we've missed? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below, and see you on the next one. Cheerio!